This is Duke University.
So I've always felt really tiny. And it never helped that my parents would try to shield me from anything remotely dangerous. When I was 6 years old, I made a habit of running to the back of the car every time we came back from a trip of grocery shopping. I would pick up as many bags as I could to show off my 6-year-old biceps. And then my dad would come running over saying, "Elizabeth, you're gonna hurt yourself." And he would take all the bags away from me and go inside with them. And I'd stand there like, but I could have done it. And on top of all of that, I was very, very shy. In fact, for the first 10 years of my life, I simply didn't speak in silence. I simply didn't speak in public. I was silent for the first 10 years of my life, essentially. If you look up overprotective parents on Google Images, you'll see thumbnails of Mr. and Mrs. Kim with a 6-year-old Elizabeth Kim in the middle. So that's why I didn't tell my parents I was planning to go to India this summer. I didn't tell them that I was going to be teaching English in the middle of nowhere, India, and I didn't tell them that I was going to be making short documentaries. I didn't say anything until I received Duke's money and my visa in the mail. And the next thing I know, I'm walking down the terminals of the Indira Gandhi Airport. I was about to work with the philanthropic arm of a $6.5 billion corporation that had a mission to bring hope to children's lives. When I walked into corporate towers, I was met with basically a modern Indian palace. It was a striking contrast between the miles of the most extreme poverty I'd ever seen in my life. There were floating glass staircases, 50-foot glass walls, white marble floors, and I was literally blinded walking in there. And while I was blinded, there were these guards and butlers taking my luggage away from me and offering me cups of chai on these cute little trays. Wow. And they took us up to an office where they sat us down, me and the other interns, and told us more about the school that we would be working at. This academy takes hundreds of the best and brightest students from all across the state of Uttar Pradesh in India. They're from the poorest of villages and the lowest of castes, live on less than $2 a day, and they're from the kinds of places that you see in National Geographic magazines at your dentist's office. They beat a .05 acceptance rate to get into this school, and they had ambitions to match. There were girls who wanted to become the next prime minister of India. And there was even a boy from rural India who wanted to be a fashion designer. And because these kids were at this school, they had that chance. They could potentially make it. This place was amazing. So it's my first day of class, and I'm feeling pretty nervous because on top of my fear of public speaking, there are 30 pairs of eyes staring up at me, expecting something grand to come out of me. When all of a sudden a hand in the very back shoots up into the air. I say, "Yes, you in the back." And I see a little boy who was literally the Indian version of Harry Potter, glasses and all. He raises his hand and he asks me, "Ma'am, can you add me on LinkedIn?" And some days later, this very same boy came to me and then asked me for my autograph. I thought that was the funniest thing in the world because I had never given an autograph before. And little did I know that that was the first of hundreds of autographs that I would be signing throughout the course of those 2 months. The butlers and the guards at the school would all greet me as I walked past, and they would give me chai whenever I wanted. To top it all, I had access to the heads of the school, the stakeholders of the foundation, and even the CEO of this $6.5 billion company. And at the end of this program, I would be presenting to them, telling them about my experiences and the recommendations I had for them to improve their program and their school. What was this world? I didn't know, but the people in it were absolutely amazing. That's something that I knew. Many of my girl students were risking their lives to be at this school. John V., one of my 7th graders, had her house ransacked by the people in her village, the people she grew up with her entire life, because they didn't want her to have an education. The reasoning behind that? They believed that if they let a girl go to school and be educated, that God would send curses down upon that village. They looted her house, they stole everything she owned. But she still came because her dad believed in her. For 12 to 14 hours every day, I interacted with these amazing students, but my schedule was a whirlwind. From teaching English, photography, journalism, SAT, college prep, you name it, I was practically running around trying to give as many lessons as I could. But when I had my video camera in hand, finally time would slow down and I felt that I could breathe a little. And these are the moments that I remember most fondly, especially because I met this musical, feminist, badass boy named Sumit. He had been born with a large part of his nasal cavity missing. The doctors thought he wouldn't make it. His mom and his dad thought that he wouldn't make it, so they abandoned him. Luckily, his grandmother took him in and cared for him even as he suffered a heart attack at the age of 2. But despite all odds, he grew up to be the best Bollywood dancer that this school had to see. As he walked down the hallways of the school, I would see little girls slightly swoon as they saw him walk past. Very proud of that little boy. And throughout these interviews that I held with the kids, any chance I had because time was running out, we grew very close. They became my little brothers and sisters, and they trusted me. They trusted me to the point that they shared stories about their lives and their experiences that they had never shared with anyone else before. It came to a point that they had enough faith in me, where one day 16 of them came up to me and told me about what had happened to one of their best friends. And this boy was a student I knew. He was in the 11th grade. And even though I didn't teach his class, I'd see him walking around. But for the past few days, no one saw him. Word was that he got into a small fight with one of the students at the school. So most of us just thought that he was suspended. But what I learned from my 16 students was that he was beaten by the principal so hard, with a stick the girth of somebody's arm, that it had broken in 2 places. My students came to me and they told me that they saw their best friend walk out of the office covered in black scars and black bruises. And if this wasn't the worst thing that could happen, he was expelled from this school. And that's a death sentence for anyone attending. Because his parents are illiterate. They have no power, no voice in this society. He wasn't even given any medical treatment. I don't know what happened to him. To this day, I don't know what happened to him. And the more interviews I held with my students, the more I realized this was just the tip of the iceberg. Things like this happened regularly there. Another student of mine, who was in the 8th grade, in a class that I did teach, one day came to class with a cast on his arm. The story was that he fell during a football match and broke his wrist. No, of course not. The real reason was that the PE teacher had beaten him for getting out of line. He beat him so hard that 2 of his fingers broke and blood was everywhere. And my students told me that they heard his screams echoing throughout the boys' hostel. That night, I went into bed and I didn't leave my bed for 48 hours. I couldn't bear to think of how I would see the principal the next day, shake his hand and smile and act as if nothing had gone wrong. I couldn't bear to pass by the PE teacher, acting like nothing had happened. It sickened me. It sickened me to the point that the only time I would leave my bed was to throw up into a trash can. Because you see, what was happening was that there was a communication gap between what was happening on the grounds of this school and then 9 hours away up in flashy New Delhi at corporate towers. Up there, they thought everything was sunshine and unicorns down here. But it wasn't true. And the reason they didn't know was because the principal would basically funnel everything, filter everything. He would only say the good things that happened and hide everything away so that he could keep his job. If teachers decided to speak up, they would basically be fired, and if a student decided to speak up, then he would be beaten and expelled. But I had this opportunity because in just a couple weeks, I would be standing in front of the CEO and the stakeholders of this foundation. And I decided to take that opportunity. The next 2 weeks became a game of chess, where in the daytime I would smile and go through life as if everything was fine, and by night I would formulate how I would convey this message. But then I got a phone call from my parents. And they yelled at me. They told me, "Elizabeth, just forget any of this ever happened. Come home as quickly as you can and just forget about it. You're going to put yourself in harm's way. You're going to make a trail of enemies, and just don't do it. Don't say a word. Come home. Forget it ever happened." 2 weeks later, I stood in front of the CEO and the stakeholders, and I gave my presentation. The principal was on a conference call. Later that week, I sent in a 15-plus page report of everything that needed to be said. When I saw the look of compassion on the CEO's face as she saw the video clips that I showed her and the pictures of the children's beautiful smiling faces, I thought maybe they would do something. Maybe they would fire the principal and replace him with someone better. Maybe they would at least replace the PE teacher with someone who was kinder to children. But what happened was they shut down the internship program in which I was a part of. I was devastated. If anything, I expected them to do nothing. But this, to this day, I still don't know what happened to that child. And I still think about him. But I did learn that whenever there's wrongdoing in this world, and whenever I may face it in the future, I'm not always going to win. And most of the time, I probably won't win. But I do know that I will no longer stay silent. Thank you.
Elizabeth Kim.